There is a growing sense tonight that a military strike against Syria may be imminent. The United States and its allies, including Canada, are preparing to respond strongly to the Assad regime's alleged use of chemical weapons against its own people. When exactly that response is unleashed is unknown. But we do know the U.S. president has been briefed on options, including military ones.
The options are there. The United States Department of Defense is ready to carry out those options.
The U.S. Navy has 4 destroyers positioned in the eastern Mediterranean Sea within range of Syrian targets. U.S. warplanes are also nearby. Britain's Prime Minister has recalled Parliament and will hold an emergency debate on Thursday, and even the Arab League has called for justice. The CBC's Nala Ayed has the latest tonight from London. Nala?
Diana, Western powers likely already know how any intervention would begin. What no one is quite sure of is how it ends.
With a looming confrontation, summer at Downing Street comes to an abrupt end. Talks on punishing Syria held behind closed doors. But on Thursday, it will be the subject of an urgent debate in the British Parliament.
It's about chemical weapons. Their use is wrong, and the world shouldn't stand idly by.
It's the unified message today from several Western capitals that this was evidence of a chemical attack, that it killed hundreds, and that the Syrian regime should be punished for it. All stressed, though, there would be no regime change.
We are ready to go like that.
In a BBC interview, U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel would not get into strategy or possible targets, only this.
Suffice to say, the options are there. The United States Department of Defense is ready to carry out those options.
The 4 U.S. destroyers in the region are well within range of Syrian targets. There are also enough air bases and the warplanes to keep them busy.
The center of a US-led strike over the next few days is likely to be cruise missile strikes on conventional forces, but it may also be in command and control facilities.
And how painful would that be to the regime?
I think the regime can take it. It will not destroy the regime.
If talk of a strike is unnerving the Syrian regime, the foreign minister didn't show it. But he said Syria would defend itself, and it's that scenario that concerns critics. How would the violence end then? Syria says allowing UN inspectors to visit the chemical attack site yesterday proves it had nothing to hide, though experts say it was too late to get an accurate read. The U.S. and its allies agree and have reportedly warned Syrian rebels that a strike could come within days.
And if so, there will be challenges and real risks. One of them is inflaming public opinion. Polls suggest that in the U.S. and the UK, military intervention isn't very popular. Diana.
Nala, what's your sense of how people in the Arab world are likely to react if military action is taken against Syria?
Well, the Syrian conflict has divided the region along sectarian lines, and the majority Sunni Muslim Arab world is actually sided with the Syrian rebels against the Syrian regime, which is dominated by the Alawites. Now, among them, I would imagine because of that, any anger would be muted. However, in the Shia community, there may very well be protests, especially in Iran and in Lebanon, and perhaps even more of that if groups like Hezbollah decide to act.
We've certainly been hearing a lot about what Western governments are thinking, but are there Arab governments who've been agitating for this to happen?
Well, you can bet that there was some agitation among some of the Gulf Arab countries which are allied with the U.S. In fact, there have been some media reports suggesting that Saudi officials have been actively lobbying the U.S. and other powers to do exactly that. Diana.
Thanks, Nala. Nala Ayed reporting from London. So there's been lots of talk today about when a military strike might happen. Here are some key dates to keep in mind. We've already mentioned Britain's Parliament is reconvening this Thursday, but there's one other date. G20 meetings begin Thursday, September 5th in St. Petersburg, Russia. Russia is a strong ally of Syria, and some observers feel a first strike during the summit is unlikely. Both the White House and Prime Minister's office acknowledge that President Obama and Stephen Harper spoke by phone today about the situation in Syria. pledging to consult closely on potential responses. And the Prime Minister's Director of Communications released a statement saying both leaders agree that significant use of chemical weapons merits a firm response from the international community in an effective and timely manner. What's also not clear yet is what a military response against Syria might look like, other than U.S. officials saying the goal isn't a regime change. A recent comparison is the NATO-led intervention in Libya. That involved a short but coordinated air attack, but no troops on the ground. Another model is the 1999 intervention in Kosovo. That involved a massive bombing campaign followed by ground troops. And finally, Operation Desert Storm of the early 90s is considered a successful study in international intervention involving the use of force from air, land, and sea, all with the backing of a UN mandate. George Petrolikas knows a great deal about military interventions. He's a retired colonel in the Canadian military who has served in Bosnia, Cyprus, and Afghanistan, and he joins us tonight from Montreal. Colonel, people have seen these pictures out of Syria the past couple of days, and the emotional reaction is we've got to do something. But what are the perils of a military action against Syria?
Well, to first of all phrase it, this is going to be a tepid military reaction. I don't think this is the intervention that the world was waiting for, and certainly not the intervention that would side on behalf of the rebels or look to change the regime. I think this particular intervention is really limited to some key goals, and that is to send a message to Assad that we have warned you several times not to use chemical weapons, and you have persisted and you have done so, and to give credibility to the response that the Obama administration and the international community has given to Assad requires some sort of action to be taken. So I believe what will happen is that this will be a much more limited and a punitive response, likely short-term in duration, but not a wider intervention that some people have felt necessary to bring an end to this conflict.
So then if it is, as you suggest, a kind of a quick surgical strike, how is he likely to react?
Difficult to predict. I mean, there is an old saying that the enemy has a vote, but unfortunately he doesn't have too many ballots to cast. His Air Force has been depleted a little bit from 2 years of use. His army is fully engaged, fighting his own insurgency or his own civil war. His Navy is quite small and quite weak. He does have Scud missiles that he could launch in some form of retribution, but to what and to what end I really cannot divine. And unless he has some sort of suicidal end in mind, I really do not see any great reaction from him. And I think we can gain a little bit of an indication of how he might react from the Israeli strike of January, February, where they halted weapons being transported from the Syrians to Hezbollah. The Israelis struck, did not enter Israeli airspace, and of course the Syrians did not react in any significant fashion around the world.
Colonel, thank you for your insights tonight.
My pleasure.